I'm Kevin Merritt. I'm the founder and CEO of a company in Seattle called Socrata, and we are leading the open data movement from behind the scenes. We've got some technology that helps governments at all sorts of different levels share their data and incorporate that data into the products and services that we all use every day. And so Daniel and the group here asked me if I would give you all just kind of a quick Open Data 101, a primer on what open data is. And so I want to share with you some thoughts. We've been on this journey for about 8 years now, working with open data. I've got about 10 minutes to catch you guys up, so let's go. So those of you who travel to Washington, D.C. probably recognize this as the Washington Metropolitan Subway map. Over in the top right-hand corner is a picture of the little sign in the metro. If you've ever taken the metro around D.C., I now rely on the metro every time I go to D.C. In fact, I'll be going there tomorrow. But I have an admission for you all, which is the first few times I went to Washington, D.C., I was intimidated to use the subway. I would fly into either Dulles or National Airport, and I would do what was most convenient. I would walk to the taxi line, and I would tell the taxi where I was going, and he would take me to wherever I needed to go. And frankly, what intimidated me about the subway was not the experience of riding it, it was the schedule itself. How do I figure out where I need to go? How do I know which station to stop in? How do I even know where it is? But now, thanks to open data, I use an application called CityMapper, not only in Washington, D.C., but also in New York City. When I visit London, when I visit Barcelona, virtually every major city now makes its transportation data available, not only the schedules, but the real-time alerts about where the buses and the metros are, which makes it super easy and less intimidating to navigate the public transportation network. And if you think about it, if you're the transportation director and one of your goals was to increase public ridership of public transportation, isn't putting data online in a consumable, useful form a great way to motivate that goal? So I want to talk a little bit about who uses open data as a starting point. So first, there are ordinary, regular citizens who lack any technical training, but nonetheless want to know how their elected officials are voting. They want to know when the pothole is going to be fixed in front of the street. They want to know where they can get the best health care for their aging parent. And so these people may not have technical acumen, but they nonetheless want to take advantage of data that's being put online by governments. Second group may be represented well here in this audience today: researchers, scientists, analysts, journalists, economists, people who I like to say can sort, search, filter, and turn data into a chart or turn it into a map in order to understand what's going on with government data. And then the last group, maybe smallest by population, but super important in terms of dissemination of information, are developers and entrepreneurs who are taking government data and incorporating it into the products and services that we all rely on every day. So CityMapper would be in this camp. But if you think about the open data movement over the last 8 years, these are the three stakeholder groups that we've thought about the most. But in the last few years, we've recognized something really important, which is that government employees are big consumers of public data as well. So if you think about the way many governments have many old legacy systems where there's data trapped in it, we can break down the data silos that exist between those systems by thinking about the data as open data. And if you think about it in an interesting way, government employees kind of fit into these three groups as well. Certainly there are programmers in the government, certainly there are analysts, researchers, economists in the government, but there's also a wide swath of individuals who lack any special technical training, but nonetheless need data to make decisions every day. So we happen to think that open data is the catalyst for data-driven digital government. We think governments are modernizing. They're moving into the 21st century. Open data starts this. And so this started 7 or 8 years ago with ideas around transparency and accountability, but it's gone all the way to the point where it is today, where it's promoting economic development, where it's improving operational efficiency within the agencies themselves. So Socrata isn't the only company thinking about open data. Gartner has done a lot of research in the last 6 months around digital government and data-driven government, and they came out with a big study last September. And what they found is that the key to progress for digital government maturity is a singular focus on the exclusive use of data in designing and delivering government policies and services. So what does open data look like? You know, this is what a lot of people think open data looks like. You know, a portal where you can go and search for information, you can explore data once you've found it. But this is really just the foundation. This is the starting point of open data, and I hope in the next few minutes you'll come to have that same opinion that I have. So open data also promotes public safety. So here is the Seattle Police Department sharing crime incident data. So if you want to figure out where there are safe neighborhoods, or if you're going to be able to walk from the bus stop to your office safely, this is a great place to go and look for that information. Also, the police chief uses it as a communications tool to build trust with the community that they serve. Here in California, city of San Francisco has a significant housing crisis. So the platform that fuels this website that the city of San Francisco created is their open data platform. They understood well that this is a data problem. If we can demonstrate the asymmetry in the market between the supply and demand of people needing housing, we can really try to solve this problem. And so this is a circumstance where open data is trying to solve a really important problem in society today. Here's another example. This is a website that was launched last year by Centers for Medicare and Medicaid at the federal level, where if you want to look up to see if there's any influence between the pharmaceutical manufacturers and the doctor who's prescribing a specific drug to you, you can go in and enter the doctor's name and the city or state that he or she is in, and you can see if there are any payments between the pharmaceutical companies and that doctor. So these can be cash payments, or they can be payments in kind. So what's remarkable about this website isn't the application itself, it's just that it's powered by open data. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid recognize that, hey, this is a data-driven problem. Let's just build a special, unique user interface for it. So again, when we think about open data, we think open data is most valuable if we can get it to where you are already making the small and big decisions that impact your daily lives. So if you think about the experience of buying a new home, well, certainly you care about how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms and how many square feet is the home, but you probably also care about how good are the schools, how safe is the neighborhood, and where is the closest bus stop so I can ride the bus to work. Well, the source of all that is government data. I mentioned City Mapper already, where you can go and travel to almost any city now, any large city, and have an easy way to navigate the public transportation system. Our dream at Socrata is that even small cities that have public transportation networks will be able to make their data available, and application providers like City Mapper will be able to come by and create this great experience, even for small towns in the future. So lastly, don't forget one of the important parts about data, which is to create the opportunity for others to incorporate that data into the products and services that they're building. And so one of the important aspects of open data is the idea of wrapping each data set with an application programming interface so that others can build things on top. So here's an example where CDC published some data. DiseaseCast went and took that data and created this great visualization environment where you could see diseases over time and kind of see how they changed and how they morphed, how they spread, and how they went from one area of the country to another. So application programming interfaces are a key to open data as well. So happy to take your questions a little bit later, but I'm going to turn it over now to Stuart, who will take it a little bit more local and talk about data here in California.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. I'm Stuart Drown. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Innovation and Accountability at a new agency called the Government Operations Agency. This agency handles the functions of government, of serving other parts of government, and has in it what are known as the control agencies. And in this agency, we're trying to build a service of culture to the people that serve the people. And open data is part of a portfolio of efforts aimed at modernizing state government processes. So in the big picture, as Michael described as well earlier, we're trying to build a culture that uses data for decision making, for making smarter decisions, and for spending limited resources on the best way possible. So ultimately, this will lead to performance dashboards, performance measurements, performance management, but more important, it should lead to a lot of discussions and a lot of talking about what works and what doesn't work, and those will be smarter discussions because we'll be able to use data from operations to kind of sort through the issues that we face that will be, as I'm learning in this job, changing every day. We've made considerable progress since I last spoke to this group, and thanks very much to our Secretary, Maribel Batcher. It's trendy to say this, I suppose, but we failed fast. And she said, all the plans we described last year, those failed. So she said, get back on it. And so we're back on it and very quickly came up with a portal and a plan and a launch and a codathon. So it's been powered by a very small team at GovOps, as well as a group from the Department of Technology and from the State Library, as well as teams from the groups that are represented here on the panel, HHS, especially OSHPD, and Socrata. So let's see, we started the Open Data Working Group with these pilot goals and objectives, and these actually have stood the test of time, 2 years. And so I'm not going to read them all for you, but they talk about essentially what we're trying to do. I would point out build capacity in the state workforce. That's something that is important and is slowly happening. Stimulate innovation. So as part of getting ready to launch the portal, or the pilot portal that we initially tried, we did a survey, and we surveyed 88 entities, and those entities reported 756 public data sets. Well, we thought that number was awfully low, but then we were like, well, wait a minute, that's way more than we can handle, because we were looking at a pilot that would be very small. But the most alarming thing, and the use of red here is deliberate, is that these data sets were in 91 different formats. So it showed there was a huge need for standardization and a way to make sure that we could share these data sets. Very, very serious problem with silos. And so that and creating metadata standards turned up to be huge needs. So as I said, the path that we were on hit a dead end, and Secretary Batcher said, well, let's do something else, and let's do it fast. We put up a Socrata portal, thanks to the Socrata team and our folks at Tech, very quickly, and then happened into a innovation contest that succeeded beyond kind of what we ever could have imagined. And this was by law. We had a cash pot, and we used it to bring in coders. As part of the launch of the portal, we put up 11 data sets that were all centered on sustainability of state government operations, because DGS is part of our agency, and they are responding to two governor's executive orders on greening the fleet and greening the buildings. They have 58 buildings that they own and operate. So we held this codathon over at the DGS atrium. This is in West Sac, in the ziggurat. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that on the skyline. It's a pyramid. And we invited in a bunch of coders. And the secretary kept on saying, well, what exactly are we going to get? What are we going to get? And we had to get her comfortable, and we had to get ourselves comfortable with saying, well, we don't know. So we're trying to set the table for an event and get get the data up there as cleanly as possible. And we brought in the data stewards, and they walked everybody through the data they had. And we had about 80 people participate, and of the 11, we put up the 11 data sets, got 14 applications back. Now, they're all prototypes, but they all were better than we had imagined they could have been. So we were hoping to get this little dashboard, a better version of that, and instead we got all kinds of really wonderful things. And two of them are in production in what we'll call a sandbox. It's the Department of Technology has set up an innovation lab, and they've put together a sandbox. So here we are. Two of them, one looks exactly at how to help the state departments create a more sustainable fleet, all these more than 5,000 vehicles. We've got targets for zero-emission vehicles, and we've got targets for where we can move things in and out of the fleet. The other one helps departments buy more, we buy a lot of stuff, buy more environmentally productive and protective goods and services. So, for me, I'm a Deputy Secretary for Innovation and Accountability. On the accountability side, it can show what departments have room for improvement. It's really a model, wonderful tool. Here's some of the other challenges. So this is really important. We had a whole crew there. By the rules, we couldn't have any state employees participate because we were giving away state money for it that we got from the legislature. So it was an opportunity to introduce government to a whole different crowd of people that hadn't thought about government or hadn't thought about what government does in the way we did. So these are potential recruits. For our departments, DGS and the library and the Department of Technology, they were forced to collaborate on a very, very tight deadline. Not surprisingly, DGS did not want to let a bunch of hackers, they're very afraid of that word, use the DGS Wi-Fi. And I said, well, no, we're not going to do that. I read all the cybersecurity stuff in the paper. And so very quickly, we had to go out and get some connectivity. We couldn't get money for food, so we had to work out some way to line up sponsors, and we have some of our sponsors here today, to buy the food directly. The other thing is learning how to flex new muscles. This was a huge morale boost. It's like, well, we can do this inside government. We know how to do this. And then just implementing these winning apps required us to develop new skills, particularly in working with open source code. And this led to the sandbox. This is a timeline. That was phase 1. This is phase 2. We're in phase 2 now. This is a less bombastic period where we're going out and shopping. We needed something that we could show departments, and it's really hard to sell something if you don't have something you can hold in your hand. So we've spent this time going out to departments that have very sophisticated approaches to data and have done a good job curating their data sets, and we're asking them to contribute, we call it the stone soup approach, contribute 3 to 5 data sets as we build this pilot. It's a 1-year pilot. And so we ask them to contribute metadata. We ask them to contribute a data dictionary. We ask them to automate their data so that we don't have a dead site. And we ask them to strongly consider, and hold some sort of event, because nothing makes data come alive more than sharing it with other people and asking them for their ideas of what neat thing could come out of this. And to that end, I'd like to put in a plug for the water boards. We'll be posting 3 of their very large data sets this week, and on Friday they're sponsoring their deep dive data event where they're doing outreach and bringing people in. And this is focusing on water quality. So now with the water quality data, we're putting up some demographic data sets. The HHS has all these data sets. That plus some mapping tools and some visualization tools, you're really starting to get something pretty interesting to look at. We're also working towards federation. We have this small pilot data set, but there's several other data portals in the state, the biggest of which is at HHS. We'll be opening a website called opendata.ca.gov this week. And if you click to portals, you can go to a page that has all the different portals on it, including ours. So that if you start clicking through those portals, you can see all the data sets are there. Well, that's faux federation. That's not real federation. So we'll be working to get real federation. We'll combine those data sets electronically And then the portals will continue to remain as independent, autonomous portals on their own. So the key thing is we've got this pilot portal, but we're going to emphasize that it's more than a platform. It's a new way of doing business. We've been pitching that we need to be low key, low cost, low risk. So low risk, that we're asking for contributions of data sets that are already public. And so they've already been published. Low cost, we want people to do this within existing resources. And low key, we don't want to overpromise. So that is where we are. We are very excited about what's about to happen. We're not quite sure what it is. We invite you to join us in the party. Thank you so much.
So again, I'm Mike Wilkening, Undersecretary of Health and Human Services. We've been the pilot agency for the state of California. And so, I was looking back at where we were a year ago, and just an amazing amount of things have happened in the last year. So when I last spoke in front of this group, we had 3 departments up on the open data portal and a promise that we would get them all up by the time I came back. Happy to say that we now have all 12 departments up with at least some data on the portal, and each of them continues to contribute more as the months go by. We have 164 data sets up on the portal. We've had over 80,000 visits to the open data portal since it came up, and in fact, we had over 8,500 in February alone. So you can see it's a site that's being used. It's a site that's continuing to expand. And as we put more data up there, I think is going to become even more relevant as we move forward. We also held the first California State Government Codeathon in June 2015, and out of that, we produced 15 apps. We partnered with CHCF to launch the Health Data Ambassador Program in 5 communities, and this is when Andy showed you the visit down to Fresno. That was in conjunction with the Health Data Ambassador down there. So these are people who are interacting at the local level and with the community engagement groups and looking at the data for that particular community and helping to better utilize data and foster communications and action out of those data. We initiated a new approach for procuring government technology in California. So we shifted the California child welfare system, the new system procurement from the traditional approach to an agile approach. Did that in about a 2-week period. It was an incredible pivot. It was done in conjunction with the federal government and with the counties. It was a monumental amount of work, very short period of time, and really showed what you can do if you get the right people around a table and tell them the answer is yes. We need to figure out how to come to yes. You can figure out what the barriers are, but along with those, we need to find out what's the way around it, through it, over it. Just they are not there to stop us. And that's a procurement, $500 million procurement that was going to bring a system up in 2021, 2022. And the 3 things that I knew about that procurement were that it wasn't going to come up in 2021 or 2022. It was going to be late. It was going to end up costing me more than I said it was going to cost, given how these traditionally have gone. And by the time that we were done, it wouldn't look like the system that we thought that we wanted, or perhaps it would, but a decade later, it really wasn't going to be the system that we needed at that time. So this new approach really focuses on the users. It allows for much more iteration as we're building the system, and we think we're at the end going to have a much better system for it. We've also partnered with CHCF and Fuse Corps to pilot an innovation office approach. We're going to be launching some use cases, some proof of concept projects at the Department of Social Services and Public Health in the next month or so. and expect that those are going to show that, focusing on the user experience and really changing the way that we approach our work is going to lead to some really interesting and better outcomes. We have a draft data use agreement that's going to span our 12 departments. So that's going to allow for departments, rather than entering into really lengthy discussions about interagency agreements, instead they'll have the general form of the agreement already done, and then we're just going to be focusing on what the use case is and who has access to the data and why they need that data and how it's going to be transmitted. So we're expecting that that's going to help to move data more freely through our agency, and also going to do it in a more secure manner. It's going to be a more thoughtful exchange of data. One of the things that last year I was talking about was my fear about moving data around. It's still there. Too much of it gets moved around on Excel spreadsheets, either on flash drives or emails. So we're trying to figure out better ways to share data internally amongst the departments. So where are we headed? We're going to continue to expand the Open Data Portal. We're expecting at least another 90 data sets in 2016 will be added onto the portal. We're going to continue to strengthen our engagements with local government. So building up to this event, we started doing regional events. We're going to continue to engage at the regional level, using the health data ambassadors, using events to really understand what's happening at the local level and how we can learn from that, how we can engage with that, and how we can collaborate. We also are looking to federate data, so figure out what's being used at the local level, what can be federated into the state. There are a lot of local governments that have open data portals and have similar data sets to what we're using. Dr. Karen Smith is going to talk to you later on about Let's Get Healthy California. There are a lot of local efforts that mirror that approach, and so using a federated approach to bring those data sets up into the state level is something we're going to be working on in the coming months. We also are looking to create a space where we can highlight apps that have been developed and highlight data sets that aren't state-owned. We're looking to create a platform that's going to enable discussions, that's going to encourage collaborations, and that's going to be a place where we can share skill sets. And we're looking to do that both internally and externally. We're looking to demonstrate success with our agile procurement approach for the child welfare system. We think that this is going to really lead to a much better system, and we think that it's going to help to inform our future procurements. We want to improve our internal data usage, better access with appropriate protections so that we can better serve the clients that we have more efficient programs. We want to implement an innovation office based on the U.S. Digital Service and 18F. We think that that's a catalyst for cultural change, and we think that that needs to be done. We want to strengthen our relationships with other governmental entities and academic institutions, and that was part of building up to this particular event, and you'll hear more about that over the next couple of days where we've gotten to this point. We want to continue to work on those, and we want to learn from their successes and collaborate. We've reached this point through the commitment of many talented and dedicated individuals, and over the next year we intend to broaden that team and build on those successes. And I expect, given the successes we've had to this point, that when I come here next year, we're going to have many more successes to share with you. Thank you.
We have time for just a few questions if anyone wants to do a few, and then we're going to go into the next exercise. Who's the brave soul? Who's got a question? You guys have answered everything. Yeah.
Hi. So my question is fear. What I heard in terms of some of the projects that went on in the earlier talk is how we deal with sharing our data, not knowing.
My family always thought I was loud enough, but hi, John O'Hanian with 201 San Diego, and Really happy to be here. Just the question is about fear. You know, when we talk about sharing our data, and I know it was brought up earlier, maybe it'll be talked about later, is we don't know what we're going to find. We don't know when we hand over our data what people are going to find, and how you're all dealing with it with your leadership in terms of challenging with that.
So, is this on? No. Okay. So when we started our effort at Health and Human Services, that was one of the first questions that I had asked people, and I really spent some time trying to figure out. I figured at some point someone was going to take the data that we were putting out there, and they were going to come up with something that wasn't flattering about our programs. And you know, where we eventually landed was that if it's inaccurate, then we're going to have to figure out how to address it. So maybe there's some work associated with that. But if it's accurate, then we have to make a decision whether we want to change that or not. So having it highlighted isn't really a negative in my view. Instead, it really gives us the opportunity to fix the problem if we think that it's something that should be fixed, or explain why it shouldn't be. But we had to be, it was a conscious decision to move forward, given that we expect that there are going to be things that are highlighted that aren't necessarily flattering.
Great.
I have a question. Thank you. Dale Fleming, San Diego County, do you see any, and I want to meet you later, do you see in HHS any time when we will see Medicaid claims data de-identified but regionalized that's available? Because when you're working on social determinant work and predictive analytics, that's the one piece of information that's missing that could really drive outcomes downstream. And I noticed that other states seem to be working with individual data, but it's de-identified, so it's, you know, HIPAA compliant or whatever. But I just wonder if you foresee that ever happening for California, since we're kind of complex.
Yeah, I do. I'm based in the state of Washington, so I'm not super familiar with all of California's legislation and even the specific bills that came about. But I know on Friday, just 3 days ago, our platform was certified by the state of California to handle all the way up to like code level 3, I think they called it, which basically includes PII data. So you can anonymize it. Any city, any county, any state agency can now do that. At the federal level, one of our longest tenured clients is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and they have been sponsoring the work that we've been going under for the last 9 or 12 months to bring our platform to what's called FedRAMP Moderate, which again will allow them to use the platform for internal data that contains some PII information that has been de-anonymized. So directionally, like that is where a number of our clients are having us lead them. And so I would say yes, you're going to be able to do that. And part of what we see is the opportunities to share data in a private manner between agencies and between organizations that are working on the same kinds of initiatives.
And internally, we're working on de-identification standards to figure out how to get that information out there in a way that's safe and that protects the individuals.
Okay. One more question? Right over here.
So we don't have a Department of Innovation. We'd love to in LA County. And we don't have a lot of money or resources spent on this. And I'm wondering, how much is the state going to take the lead and maybe put some local resources that, if you talk about standardizing across the state, that would be great. But I'm thinking, I come from the HIV world where there's lots and lots of money, and the state gives us a lot of money and requires things in return, and it's all very standardized, and it's all very supported. And I'm wondering, what is the projection? What's for open data? Is it something that's going to be finally funded adequately and support the local communities from the state?
You know, the efforts at HHS to this point have been redirections internally and use of resources from California Healthcare Foundation. I'm expecting at some point that we're going to reach that threshold where we have to really have that discussion about additional resources. But to this point, we haven't. And it's a matter of prioritizing the resources that we have within our department. So we started off pretty small, realizing that we didn't have the resource. And I think that as we start to show successes, that the willingness of the departments to redirect resources to this effort increases. But, you know, to scale up, you know, in a major way at some point will require a funding discussion, but we're not there at this point.
As we've been going out to enlist departments, we have been focusing on choosing data sets that serve their ends. There's a great argument to be made for transparency and sharing, but that's not an argument that works when you're trying to get a department to go through the effort of cleaning up and structuring their data and sharing it. And so we would hope, and we see reason to be optimistic on this, that the departments will want to do this based on what they see in their own data. And in our 5 months or so of doing this, they have seen the benefits of seeing and being able to use their own data better. At this point, we're very much focused on using existing resources. And we'd like to see how far we can take that. I can tell you, we don't expect to be seeing a lot more money in the near future for this. And so we're hoping that people can use their data to find efficiencies and better ways of doing business that can allow them to redirect existing resources.
Is there time for me to add one quick comment?
One quick.
Yeah, so we work with about 350 different government agencies, and what we see is almost a self-funding model where that initial step into open data takes a little bit of a leap of faith, but from there, the expansion, the additional data sets that you're bringing online, the mechanism to fund it really is to think about alternative delivery models. So one of the slides that I showed you where Medicare built the website where you could go and check the influence between pharmaceutical companies and doctors prescribing various medicines. If they had built that 5 years ago, the approach that they would have taken would have been a very traditional, monolithic, put an RFP out, have a systems integrator build for basically a full stack solution that included hardware, software, database licenses, the full environment. But what Medicare did for that initiative is they said, we already have the data, we already have a great database of the payments between pharmaceutical manufacturers and doctors. It's API enabled, it has great metadata. All we need is somebody to build a pretty simple user interface. And so the cost of that and the time to deliver that were both a couple of orders of magnitude better and faster than if they had done this a few years ago. So significant cost savings in the way they built that.